I'm going to drop some opinions on the whole millennials aren't having kids thing as a working class millennial.
Birth rates are slowing down in the United States. Even in South Korea, birth rates are slowing down drastically. And people are getting worried. People are talking. Why are millennials not getting pregnant? Why are they not having children? Why are the Gen Zs not having children? What is it that they are choosing? Most of them are choosing to be child free. Even the ones that are having children, they'll just have one or two and stop. Why are they not having seven children, six, five, like it used to be? Today's conversation, we are talking about why are millennials not having kids? Why are the Gen Zs not having kids? What is going on in the society? So, what do you think? Why do you think millennials are not having children? Is it because they've seen how having children, they've seen what it entails, they've seen how much money they're going to spend, and they're not even making that kind of money? Or they've seen that to even be mentally ready to take care of a child is not beans. Anyways, I have a few reactions to share with you all. People are talking about why millennials are not having kids in our generation, unlike the other generations. That is a normal thing. You get to a certain age, you're supposed to be producing if you can, and the ones that can't produce, they're hiding. They're hiding somewhere, because if people see you that you can't produce, that is like a disgrace. So, but right now, even you can produce, you don't want to, because why should you? I have interesting reactions to share with you, but then I would really like to know your own thoughts about this conversation down in the comment section. Let's go ahead and watch the reactions together, and I'm back to share my thoughts at the end of the video.
I'm going to drop some opinions on the whole millennials aren't having kids thing as a working class millennial. It absolutely baffles me that the government is pretending like they don't know why we're not having kids, because frankly, it is glaringly obvious. The economy is a fucking tire fire right now. The cost of groceries, the cost and availability of baby formula, the cost of diapers, the cost of childcare, the cost of giving birth in the United States averages like $14,000. I ain't got $14,000 or even really the ability to save that much money. A quick Google search told me that 73% of millennials are living paycheck to paycheck. Statistically speaking, when you're born poor in this country, you're probably going to die poor, and your kids are going to be in the same boat. Being poor fucking sucks. I don't want that for my kid. It's not that we didn't try to have better lives. A lot of us went to college, and what did that get us? A bunch of us have debt that we're never going to be able to pay off. A lot of us have degrees that are almost irrelevant because the jobs that we were told were there when we got our degree aren't really there, as it turns out. Or they are there, and the people that are in those positions can't afford to retire, so they're just going to stay where they're at. Where does that put the rest of us? Entry-level jobs. Retail, food, customer service. In the state that I live in, that averages like $11 to $15 an hour. And before y'all hit my comments saying that people making that little money shouldn't have kids, that's most of us. Maternity leave basically isn't a thing, and the jobs that offer it typically offer it unpaid for like 2 weeks, which opens up a whole slew of issues because you can't afford to take that time off, so you gotta go right the fuck back to work. Like, fuck the fact that giving birth takes a huge toll on your body. The people who have C-sections, which is a major surgery, can't afford to take the recovery time. When you've gotta go back to work in 2 weeks or immediately, then you don't get that critical bonding like period of time with your infant. If you're working all day, then you can't breastfeed your kid every couple of hours, so you have to depend on baby formula, which again is extremely expensive and potentially unavailable. That's how you end up with latchkey kids. That's how you end up with mommy and daddy issues and abandonment issues because your parents are never around. If you're at work all day and don't have a family member or somebody that doesn't have to work and can watch your kid all day for free, then you've got to pay for childcare, which is outrageous. In the state that I live in, the average cost of just daycare is $15.77 an hour. When you are making as little money as millennials are, childcare is literally inaccessible. When you can't afford to take care of your child, that's called neglect, and you can have that child taken from you and face serious legal repercussions. Even if it wasn't your fault, say baby formula wasn't available in your area, so you couldn't afford to feed your kid, so you get slapped with neglect charges. That company that couldn't provide the baby formula faces absolutely no repercussions. And then I recently just learned about how the diaper industry is like a whole thing. Most other countries have their children potty trained by 18 months old. The US doesn't even recommend starting potty training until you're 2 years old. And when you start potty training that late, it's going to take you a while to get a hang of it, which is just more money in diaper industry pockets. What I think is going on genuinely is the government is starting to sweat the fact that their working class isn't replenishing itself. When the bubonic plague hit Europe, it knocked out like 30 to 50% of the entire population, which made workers a lot scarcer, so they actually had to pay them more in order to convince them to come work for them, which we all know is the absolute last thing that any of these companies want to have to do. How many millennials do you know own their own house? Kudos to those of us that do, but the vast majority of us are renters or live with our parents or live with a pile of roommates. The cost of rent increases a lot every single year. I don't want to bring a child into a situation where I'm not sure I'm going to have somewhere to live in a year. It's not that we don't want to have kids. A lot of us do. In fact, I would love to have a kid with my wife, but I'm not going to have a kid in this country right now. I'm not. And this is entering conspiracy territory a little bit, but I think the government's interest in removing abortion rights and access in certain states is in a direct response to us not having kids. They can't force us to reproduce, but they can force us to give birth. The government views us and treats us like livestock. That's why we don't want to have kids.
I love the fact that the generation before us is shocked that none of us are having children. They're like, why don't you want kids? Meanwhile, every day growing up, our parents were saying things like, oh my God, you have no idea how hard it is raising you guys, how much money it takes to raise a child, how much effort we put in every day. They have the audacity to ask if I want kids? No, I'm broke and lazy. The two things that seem super important, apparently.
Y'all need to stop asking the newer generation of kids when they're going to start having children and when they're going to get married. Because let me tell you about this newer generation. These kids are all products of situations like two parents not understanding the responsibility that having kids have. So they end up giving birth to kids in a house that is not financially stable, in a house that is not emotionally stable, and the relationship isn't really stable itself. So the fact that they give birth to kids like that, it already alters the children's mindset when they're growing up because they see what's going on. Or the parents who up and have kids because they feel like that's what they're supposed to do. So they have kids even though they never really wanted it in the first place. And they can definitely show when raising that child because they don't really care. Or you have the single parent who literally is doing everything on their own because the other person decided they just didn't want to do it anymore. Like, all those situations cause the younger generation of kids to look at marriage and having children in a different mindset. Like, I would not be surprised if in the next 5 to 10 years, a whole bunch of married couples are going to say they're not going to have kids, or a whole bunch of people are just going to say, I don't want to get married. And let me tell you why. Parents who choose not to have kids are not bad people at all. It's honestly good that they understand how much responsibility it takes to take care of a kid. And if they decided that they didn't want to do that, I'd rather them just say, we're not having kids because we don't want to deal with all that stuff, than they give birth to a kid just to be a shitty parent, if that makes sense. And quite honestly, people who don't want to get married, they shouldn't be shamed into not wanting marriage. Not everyone wants to get married. Not everyone wants to be pregnant. Not every woman wants to be pregnant. I hope you guys know that. You'll be surprised the amount of women that secretly don't want to have kids. They just don't talk about it because they don't want to be shamed in front of a whole bunch of older generation of women saying, oh my God, we used to be a country. Not all women want to be pregnant. Not all women want to go through the whole pregnancy. And I respect that. Do I want to get pregnant and have kids? I do. I definitely do. But I'm not going to shame a woman if they don't want to do all that stuff because it's not for everybody. And women should not be only tied to the role of mother. We can do anything else. We can be a CEO. We can do all the other stuff. We don't have to be a mom. And just like how they don't have to be a mom, they don't have to be a wife either. Some women just kind of want to do their own thing. Just like how some men want to do their own thing. So we need to stop forcing these people to have kids and be married because that's not everyone's goal anymore. And we need to just let them be.
Millennials having fewer kids could be a drag on the economy for the next decade. This may not faze some child-free millennials. Child-free millennial right here. We're using the money that could have been spent on childcare to splurge on lavish vacations, flashy boats, and other luxuries popular amongst dinks, couples who live on double income with no kids. Y'all, I can't believe this propaganda at this moment. Are you kidding me? What millennial do you know has a boat? Who is going on vacations? The last time I went on vacation was a good 6 years ago, unless you want to count a staycation where I stayed at home. I can't with these people. So apparently, that kind of spending won't be enough to offset the drag of a shrinking population on the economy over the long run, especially considering that the US birth rate has collapsed over the last half century. The shortage of babies has been particularly acute since the pandy. I mean, that makes sense. Like, why would people want to bring a baby into a pandemic? Like, make it make sense. They talk about shrinking birth rate, blah blah blah, blah blah blah. Fertility rates down, blah blah blah. I'm guessing that's why conservatives are trying to push this whole abortion ban and come after IVF and treatments and stuff, because they really are trying to force people to have kids. Personally, as a child-free millennial, I'm going to stay this way for the rest of my life. I'm going against the grain, okay? Number one, who cares if it's the reclining birth rate, okay? Let it recline. Maybe all of us dwindle down to zero so we can start over, because at this point, we don't deserve to populate, okay? Unless we get this world under control, there's too much going on, especially in the US, okay? We don't have it together here. So why bring a child into this world? All right. That's just personally me and my choice. If you do it, do you, boo boo, whatever. But personally, I'm going to remain child free. I'm not going to let this propaganda stop me. All right. And also, I forgot to mention in the article, they said that they were going to try to incentivize people by maybe having more housing available, more affordable housing for us, so they're going to have kids. I'm like, y'all need to have that anyway, not just to get us to have kids, have more affordable housing.
Gen Z is not trying to have kids. And I don't blame them. Because I ain't trying to have them little shits either. But the government is shaking in their boots because we don't want children. Our grandparents and parents are shaking in their boots because we don't want children. They keep asking why. I'm going to tell you. Probably because we can't afford to. Y'all do know the cost of living went up 68%, but our wages only went up 18%. Y'all do know that, right? We don't even know if we're going to have a suitable earth to raise our kids in the next 40 years. And you want me to bring a child into this world? And I'm not saying all of Gen Z, because some of y'all took the risk. Me, personally, and the vast majority of the people I know, they're not even thinking about it. Not even trying to consider it. How are we going to have children if we can't even afford ourselves? I know people that's so backed up on student loans, they just don't want to pay for that shit no more. And since the government is getting so upset about it, my honest take is the government only wants us to have children so we can go back and ask the government for help. The help that they're not even going to give us. The help that they're going to claim that they don't have. But they had billions of dollars to fund the war in Israel, though. They had billions of dollars to bring migrants across country. But our healthcare system and our school system is still fucked. Gen Z is the most unhinged, most honest, most I don't give a fuck generation there is. So if you think Gen Z is gonna fall for we need to have kids to better our population, you're smoking! Because it's not happening. Everybody keep asking us what we gonna do when we get older. Who knows? Who knows if we're even gonna get older? I might just off myself before I even get that old, to be honest with you. And if I don't have kids, my money will take care of me. That's the least it can do. I hope it's going to be worth anything by the time I get that old. I actually hope it's just going to be earth by the time I get that old, because goddamn.
One of my favorite things about this generation is that we realize that not everyone is meant to have children. The amount of people that keep bringing children into poverty and just unstable environments is just insane to me. So many people have children because they feel like it's something they're supposed to do, like it's the next natural step in life. But what I love about this generation is that we recognize that we don't need to have children to have a fulfilling life. I also feel like when people have kids, they're assuming that their child is going to be born perfectly healthy, but they don't think about the fact that they could potentially have a child that could have special needs and depend on them for the rest of their lives. Like they might actually have to take care of this human being, not for just 18 years, but literally until they die. And I feel like it's really selfish to bring a child into the world if you're not truly ready for all of that. And I do think there are some people out there that are ready for all of those things, but for the most part, the vast majority of us are not physically and emotionally ready to raise a child, and we shouldn't be having them.
I think there's a lot of normalized child hatred that ends up under the umbrella of like climate change and population control, and that we shouldn't have kids for like political reasons. And my podcast co-host Contra Tenor used to talk about this a lot, that millennials will say, oh, I'm not having kids because it's not smart to have kids in this economy or whatever. And like, I definitely feel economically unprepared to have kids, but I also just like don't like them. And I don't think that dislike is natural to me. I think that it's generational trauma. And I've definitely even said myself before, like, it's not smart to have kids, etc., etc. And I'm actually cheering millennials not having kids because I think that we need to get out of this infinite growth paradigm that's ultimately fed by people having more kids and more workers. So it'll force the global economic powers to reckon with the root problems of this system. But I just think there's tons of generational trauma being held in people's bodies, and we are starting to reckon with this and feel into it and really feel what the base emotions are. And I think that our parents just had kids out of obligation. My mom said something to me one time, you are nothing if you weren't married. And I think people sort of had kids because they were supposed to, and whether or not they had like this internal hatred of them. And I think this hatred just comes from a patriarchal system of, I am parent, I am in control of you, my emotions are more important than you, and as a child, your emotions are not important. And you're in the way, and you are too loud, and you're supposed to shut up and let me control you. And then we grow up and we just feel that way towards kids. And I hate feeling that way towards kids. It's like a gut reaction that I have. And I just think that that feeling is super common, and it's been stuffed into places that it doesn't actually exist. Like, we can make a conscious decision not to have kids because it's not good for the climate, but we don't have to hate children around it. That just doesn't make sense to me. And also, I'll just add in here that it's super important that people are allowed to have children, that they're allowed to make that decision, because there is so much history of governments at certain times wanting the population to have more kids, and at certain times wanting them to have less kids, and sterilizing people who are in the unwanted group, usually people of color or disabled people, etc. So right now we happen to be in an economic and political circumstance where the government wants people to have more kids. But I would remind you that they only want white, privileged kids, and preferably Christian. They don't want kids of quote-unquote minority races or religions, etc. But people decide to have kids for all sorts of reasons. I think my mom really wanted me, which is beautiful and soulful. And she found herself in a tough situation. And I have been able to just sort of make the conscious decision not to have kids. And I've been really happy with that. But I still don't like them.
Aside from other important reasons that people decide not to have children, the millennials and the Gen Zs are not having kids. Let's just say mostly the millennials, okay? The Gen Zs are still growing up. Some of them might change their mind later. But the millennials, I feel like one of the very important reasons because things are very expensive. Things are very expensive everywhere. To even take care of yourself, to feed yourself alone as a person, you need to work how many jobs again? At the end of the day, you'll be very tired, you'll be very exhausted. Then the thought of not having a child to get home to and all of that, millennials cannot understand it. This generation don't get it. And I feel like another reason is because of the way their parents must have been, saying some things about children to them. For example, one of the video, like, I wish I never had you. I wish I had not had, I had like two kids. Or they see the way their mom suffered, or the way their father is suffering just to raise them. Or they see just see that it's not even easy to be in a family of six, and you pay attention to every one of them. They've seen it, like they're seeing everything play out. They've seen the way their parents struggle just to put food on their table. They don't want that same thing to happen to them. So that is why I feel like one of them too, most of the millennials are not having children. Aside from the fact that having kids for this man is 50-50. And even having kids, even having kids generally is like you're 50, getting pregnant 50-50, you either come out of it alive or you come out of it dead. Okay. And when you come out of it alive, if you think you're married and you have a child with your husband, once you don't even know the kind of person he's going to be, if he's going to be a good father or not. And when you have the child with him, some of them might eventually leave you and say, "Oh, you're looking too fat. You're having so much stretch mark. You're no longer spontaneous. You don't really have my time anymore." They leave it for younger women. So aside from that thought alone, that okay, having kids for this man means that they don't even have time for me anymore. Most women don't want to have children. Most women are still are still dealing with their childhood trauma. They don't want to have kids because they need to still, they have a lot of healing to do and they don't want to pass that on to another human. Are you a millennial? Do you have a child or you don't? Why don't you have a child? Let us know down in the comment section. I feel like another reason why millennials are not having kids now is because most of them are already choosing themselves. And most of the time, when you're selfish with yourself, when you love yourself so much, not average kids is one of it. And I feel like I agree with people when they say child free by choice people are selfish. Okay. And I feel like this era, people prioritize traveling the world, traveling more, they prioritize themselves more. And if you prioritize yourself more, deciding to have a child would delay that kind of priority. It will obstruct it. Imagine having kids. How do you decide to travel? You cannot just get up, pick your bag, and go. You have to put things in place. And if you don't have a supportive partner, you don't have a village around you, you're not going anywhere. And if you decide to even pick your kids along with you to travel, it's another headache. It's not going to be as fun as you going along with your friends. It's not going to be as fun you going solo alone or going with your husband or your partner. Traveling with a child, traveling with kids is more stressful than not traveling with them. The other day, I saw a video on a lady analyzing how much it takes to give birth in the United States. She talked about how much she paid having twins in the hospital. It was a lot. It was a lot. So, the kind of money people pay just to give birth is so much that it will make you, if you don't have that kind of money, why should you even decide to get pregnant? Why should you start that kind of lifestyle? And I feel like there's so many reasons why billionaires are not doing it. And the way the world we live in now, like things are just getting from bad to worse. Things are getting very scary. And it can be very scary for you to decide to bring a child to this world when you don't even know how you're going to survive alone. But what is your own take? Why do you think millennials and the Gen Zs are not having kids in this generation? And I feel like it's not all the older generation that accepts the fact that they don't want to have kids, because I've seen videos of parents of the millennials are like, why don't you want? They fight them. They fight them when their children say, I don't want to have kids. They say, but we gave birth to you. We did it. We survived. We didn't. I gave birth to you when I had nothing. Look at me now. I have so much money. They don't want to understand when this generation say they don't want to have kids. It fights them. Are you older generation? How would you take it when your own daughter or your own son says they don't want to have children? Is it okay by you, or it touched you one way or the other? I feel like we need to have this conversation in today's video. Anyways, thank you all so much for tuning in today. It's your favorite girl again, Maria David. And don't forget to like and share and subscribe, and kindly turn on the post notification bell to get notified as soon as I upload another interesting video. And of course, I'll see you all in my next video. Bye.